The parking lot lamps.
We had a scene here that we were going to start off at the barricades, and then we cut away, and there was this whole big conversation between Tom and Hattie, and then Toby Jones joins them, Ollie joins them, and it was just this big sort of scene. And instead, I just cut straight to this guy. I pulled that scene out. You'll see that on the deleted scenes. I just cut to Andy Stahl here, one of our fine local actors, playing Mike Hatlin with his chicken wing, and the bug hitting the window. And you'll see why I pulled it out. It wasn't at all bad stuff. It was just a big, long pause, and the truth is I wanted that bug to hit the window. So once I pulled that out and just cut to that guy with the chicken and saw that bug hit the window, the momentum of the whole film really kicked into another gear. It was a very satisfying thing to do, and I love this bug. It is just beautifully conceived and gorgeously executed. Again, cafe effects. Those fine folks are the ones who did the CGI work in my dear friend Guillermo del Toro's movie masterpiece, Pan's Labyrinth. And when I saw that movie, I knew he had not had a big budget on that film. And I said, Guillermo, you got to introduce me to these people. And so he made the introductory call and hooked me up with Cafe Effects, Jeff Barnes, Everett Burrell, all those fine folks over there who just turned themselves inside out to give us an amazing array of special effects, an amazing number of special effects in this movie on a budget I'd be embarrassed to quote. I mean, it was like it was about $100 million less in special effects money than, say, Pirates of the Caribbean 3.
Probably more than that.
Actually, more than $100 million less. Anyway, they did a fantastic job. That's where this work comes from. The bug itself, some great creature design there supervised by Greg Nicotero and me, and some great work done there by Bernie Wrightson, our dear artist friend. And we must acknowledge the other creature design artists for K&B, Mike Broom, Aaron Sims, Tristan Shane, did some amazing work, but I do believe these bugs were most influenced by Bernie Wrightson. And I just love the way they come to life here. I love the way it's a total magic trick to me. I don't know how these marvelous artists do this at their computer, but it blows my mind. And it's such a pleasure to see these shots come along when you're editing the movie, because it starts off with blank shots, and then it takes on this life of its own. Now here we have a little trick, Daryl Pritchett hurling baseballs at the window to get him to crack. And then that goes through a huge process, winding up in a computer where these guys add the interactive element. It's just wonderful to see.
Look out, look out, look out! The light, douse the light!
This scene was an absolutely crazy and intense and exhilarating scene to direct. It's a huge sequence. It's almost 10 minutes long. We shot it in 6 days. I've never moved so fast in my life. What made it particularly weird and challenging is, when you approach a scene like this, all that talk about improvised camera work aside, you really do have to plan the shots out for a big action scene like this. There's a lot of physical stuff going on. There's a lot of effects that need to happen. So you do storyboard, and when you're there on the set and you're actually starting to engineer how you're going to shoot it and engineer the blocking and the timing of things, you sometimes realize that your imagination when doing the storyboards doesn't really apply to the reality of the set and the reality of what's going to happen. You've got pockets of people here and there. You've got to keep their stories going while cutting back and forth from the other people and their stories are going. And I realized that what I had storyboarded was at least, 50% obsolete?
Yeah, it was about the whole second half of the sequence you changed as we were going.
Yeah, it was really scary. There's like a huge centipede at one point that crawls through the break in the glass and threatens Billy, and Irene kind of saves him. And I knew I needed the idea of Billy being threatened by a monster.
It was really critical for the end.
It was really critical, but I also knew that if I had this big chunk with a centipede in the center of this thing, it would throw the timing off completely. I couldn't just take a 1-minute detour while all this stuff was going on, and you had to keep this momentum going. There's only so many times you can cut back to them trying to light the mop before they better damn light the mop, or it's going to start being funny to the audience. It'll be like the Monty Python thing of seeing the knight riding over the hill, and every time you cut back to him, it's the same shot, and he hasn't gotten any closer. And I knew that this sequence was going to be riddled with those kinds of problems months later in the editing room as I started to block it. Because the little pictures you draw when you're planning is really quite different than standing on the set and starting to block the actors and get a sense of the rhythm. So I knew that I was going to have to reinvent this sequence substantially as we were shooting it. But yeah, so what scene 35 really wound up being was me taking all the storyboards off the big foam core board and throwing them in the air and saying, okay, let's do this, and really making the scene up as I went along, which was really scary because there was so much to keep track of and so much to try and sew together and so much to anticipate how it would cut together in the editing room months down the road. And it was just kind of making it up as we went along. And everybody, God bless them, just pitched in and trusted me. But once we got into the editing room and started cutting it together, wow, I was shocked at how well it all went together. Pleasantly shocked, of course, because it was a nice thing to learn that when the chips are down and all your plans have fallen apart, you can rely on your instincts, and that your instincts will see you through and not leave the sequence unfilmed or unrealized, especially when you know you have such a tight schedule and you're not going to have the luxury of reshooting anything if you screw it up.
As long as the machines are working and you can dial 911, but you take those things away.
This is also a very good moment, just from a standpoint of camera technique, the way that the camera is peeking through characters and finding those moments. Again, that improvised thing, kind of a good moment to get back to Ron, our DP, Billy and Richie, the camera operators. I met them on The Shield, directing an episode of The Shield. I always knew I wanted to shoot this movie in a much more improvised and ragged style. I was a huge fan of The Shield, still am. I was a big fan of The Shield. Sean Ryan, who created The Shield, found out I was a big fan and invited me to come direct an episode. I was excited to do it just for its own sake, but also I thought maybe this is good training for me for what I want to do with The Mist. And it wound up to be such an exciting experience that I said to Ron and to the boys, the camera boys, come do this movie with me. And that's where I think you can see the influence of that style and that Shield experience in some of the work that we're doing here. They have an amazing intuition. Here's a shot I really love. This is a great example of the kind of beautiful improvised camera work that my guys were doing. This is Billy Gearhart on his Steadicam. I love the way this shot just keeps flowing and finding the faces as the dialogue proceeds. It's just one of those things, maybe the audience doesn't even notice it, maybe you listening don't even care. But it's one of those things that as a filmmaker, you're always looking for the exciting visual thing. It's not always the flashy thing that gets you excited. A shot like this just delights me because I love the way it plays out, how the faces come in, what the actors are doing, and just how the lens is capturing what's going on. Stuff like that really is a thrill for me. Also, I really do like airing out a cut with a shot. If you can hold the shot, if you can sustain the shot. I've always liked doing that very much. Let the story happen without the cutting, if you can. And every once in a while, you'll find a shot like that. That is just perfect for that purpose. And you can hold that shot, and none of the other coverage will improve it. And so that's really fun, especially in a movie like this where you do wind up with a lot of fast cutting because of the speed and the pace of the film and the intensity of some of the scenes. I want to get back to the editing for a moment. We had a very crunched post-production schedule, about 6 months from when we stopped shooting to when we handed the movie over for release. That was insane. I told you before, aside from my great camera crew from The Shield, I also took Hunter Vi, my editor, Allison Young, my script supervisor, who were very conversant in this particular style. Being in the editing room with Hunter was a pleasure. He had edited my Shield episode. And since he knows this style so well, he's as well versed in it as the cameramen are, I thought it would be really handy because editing this kind of material is so different because every single take is different. Every single setup is improvised by those wonderful lunatic cameramen of mine. So it's not like you have 8 choices of the same shot. It's always different. And Hunter proved to be worth his weight in gold. And boy, did we work some long hours during those months editing the film together there in the room. One of the pleasures of this movie is that I got to be really good friends with Tom Jane. And Tom said at one point while we were shooting, he said, I'd really love to come in and observe you editing. And I said, okay, Tom, I've heard this from other actors and they never follow through. Well, Tom showed up. He's no slouch. He came in because he's interested in the process. He's interested in directing. In fact, he just finished directing his first movie, some low-budget thing that he wrote with a partner. I'm very excited for him, but he wanted to learn. So the first 3 months or 4 months of this editing process, you turned around, there was Tom on the couch in the editing room just hanging out. And I'm talking every day. He did it like a full-time job. And it was a pleasure to have him there because Hunter and I both adored him. And he was very respectful of the process. He would never intrude unless we asked him to. And what a great thing to have a third set of eyes in the room. We could turn around and say, Tom, what do you think? And then he would give us a wonderful, reasoned opinion. You know, it was great to have him around. We called him the editing room mascot. And I loved his stick-to-itiveness. He was hungry to learn, and he took it very, very seriously.